Hi, my name is JohnRamen. Thank you for joining me today as we part ways with one of our beloved colleague, friend, no, family. March 2017 is when I first met my Nintendo Switch. I remember it like it was yesterday. I went store to store, midnight release to midnight release. You see, I did not have the forethought to pre-order the Switch, as I didn't realize how big of a success it would truly become. Shame on me for doubting it and the potential it brought upon the gaming industry. I ended the night without a Switch in my hands, so I did the next best thing, and I went to the internet and was luckily able to snag one online. It did mean that I'd have to wait a couple weeks, but it would be worth it. I was in college at the time, close enough to home where I could commute. I didn't drive at the time either, so I relied on my parents or taking the bus for said commute. I let my parents know I was expecting, and sure enough, one day, it was delivered along with a copy of Breath of the Wild, and I immediately downloaded Shovel Knight as well. Just like that, I was already beginning to make memories. I remember one of my buddies was dorming at the same college as myself, so we met up one day and I was showing him Breath of the Wild. He's not big into Nintendo as I am, but was showing him some gameplay anyways. Now, I remember what I was showing him wasn't the most entertaining thing to watch, as I wasn't that far along in the game at the time, but I wanted to explore the area as I was just so invested into the exploring aspect of this version of Hyrule. We then proceeded to play Shovel Knight co-op with one Joy-Con each, since no Pro controllers were out at the time. This first month, I was playing the Switch in every possible way that Nintendo intended it to be played. Next came Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. While I had a Wii U, I actually did not get Mario Kart 8. So when I picked up Deluxe, it was a brand new experience for me. I had picked up another set of Joy-Cons, so I was able to play with a group of 4 friends at a time. And you know how Mario Kart goes. Friendships were destroyed almost immediately, and it's still a strong go-to party game to this day. The next release I was excited for, believe it or not, was ARMS. It was such a silly, wacky game with an interesting gameplay style. It had a fun, diverse cast of characters, and because of Min Min, the game gave me partial inspiration for my online moniker. I already had a few reasons for my name being JohnRamen, but that just sealed the deal. I do remember the online being funky, especially if you wanted to do 2-player online, as I played a bunch with another friend of mine. Not being able to guarantee a game mode that you want to play is kind of a poor game design choice. More on that later. My friend and I aptly renamed the game to Grabs, because of our strategy of just stun-locking our opponents with grabbing them. All in all, ARMS was a unique experience to have fun with. These first few months were just release after release for games, as Splatoon 2 was next up on my radar for Switch games. Sadly, Splatoon 2 was the reason I dropped ARMS pretty quickly. Remember that Wii U I had mentioned I had but I didn't have Mario Kart? Yeah, that's because I got a Wii U specifically for 2 games, Smash 4 and Splatoon. I played so much Splatoon that when I saw it have a Switch release as well, I knew I had to get it, and I played just as much, if not more, in Splatoon 2. I will talk about Splatoon 3 later as well, but I'm just going to mention it here that Splatoon 2 is my favorite game out of the franchise. Based on the hours spent, based on my hype for the game, and based on how much fun I had with it. The introduction of Salmon Run was also pretty great, and as I mentioned with poor game design, the Salmon Run game mode was so fun. But it being a limited time mode day by day was so demotivating for me to play it. Another poor choice I wasn't a fan of was the constant button mashing to get through the stage announcements when launching the game. It was tolerable in the first game, as there weren't too many modes to go through, but Splatoon 2 had so much dialogue, just let us skip the intro. If they advertised their NSO app to show us the stages, just use that for the announcements. Aside from those 2 things, Splatoon 2 was one of my most played games during the first year of the Switch. Now, I'm not big into fighting games, but I am big into Pokémon, and I think a Pokémon fighting game where you control the Pokémon themselves is so freaking cool and something that seemed like a pipe dream for my inner child. Really, the only reason I picked up Pokémon again, yes, I got it for the Wii U, was the addition of Decidueye. Rowlet instantly became my favorite grass-type starter, and Decidueye is such a cool, unique design with an awesome typing that I just had to play as him. However, none of my friends are huge into either Pokemon or fighting games, so this game just had me go against the AI, as I was nowhere near close to being able to compete online either. The game died on me quickly, but such a neat idea that I wish Pokemon would do more often. And lastly, in 2017, the first big holiday title, Super Mario Odyssey. Now, if you've made it this far into the video, thank you. I'll understand if you want to click away after what I'm about to say. Brace yourselves. A hot take is approaching. I am not the biggest fan of Super Mario Odyssey. Just wait. Just wait. I played the game. I beat the game. I can appreciate the game. But it's just not for me. Sure, when I was younger, I played Super Mario Sunshine, but I don't know what it is about 3D platforming just to get hundreds of collectibles, but it just doesn't grab my attention like it did back then. I feel like I want a grander purpose in my games, and Mario Odyssey just didn't have that. I also wasn't the biggest fan of the capturing mechanic, and people treated the ending where you captured Bowser like it was the biggest spoiler in any game imaginable, and I'm just sitting there like, okay, cool, but I'm just running away. If you captured him and then got to wreak havoc around the world, that would be a different story. But it's a Mario game, so that will probably never happen. Anyways, if you've made it past my burning hot take, congrats. You've won an obligatory shameless self-promotion. So go ahead and subscribe to my channel, where who knows what the future holds for me now, because as a very sweet, subtle, and gentle reminder, my Switch is dead. Now that we've gone through the first year of the Switch, it's time to hone in on some of the games that hold more weight on me as an individual. The first of which being the lineup of mainline Pokemon games. The Switch was home to a few spin-offs, but I mainly focused on the standard turn-based RPG style of classic Pokemon. With Pokemon being my first video game ever, go watch that video if you haven't, I was excited to see what the Pokemon Company and Game Freak could do on a console release. And the Pokemon on Nintendo Switch experience is less than desirable. The first game released being Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, another run through the Kanto region on a home console, was nostalgic, and that's about the only positive thing I had to say about it. I wish you could swap between a standard mode and a Let's Go mode. I never got into Pokemon Go as a whole, so having a whole mainline game centered around that mechanic just didn't sit well with me. I still beat it, but I don't plan on ever returning to it. Unless they do a Let's Go Johto, then consider me swayed. Afterwards, we got Sword and Shield. Despite the controversies it had with Dexit and the Forbidden Tree, I think Sword and Shield are the most polished Pokemon games on the Switch. And that's about the only positive thing I have to say about it, because from a gameplay standpoint, it was so boring. The game is so linear where you have to go from point A to point B without stopping and seeing what C is about. The characters didn't really stick with me all that well. I literally had no idea what the evil team was and any clue to what their true motive was. Team Yell is just straight up stupid. Dynamaxing and Gigantamaxing is a dull mechanic. Pokemon get big. So fun. I'll give some credit that some Gigantamax forms were pretty cool, like Blastoise, Butterfree, Lapras, Snorlax. Wow. All Gen 1 Pokemon, huh? I also like the change up on how the Elite Four was handled, where you instead go through a championship tournament instead. It felt very similar to how the anime handled what happens when you obtain 8 gym badges. I'd also like to state that normally in a Pokemon game, I can find one good starter Pokemon that easily outmatches the other two for me, but Sword and Shield did not have any iconic starters that I absolutely wanted on my team. I am perfectly okay with boxing any one of these three. So yeah, no real core memories to be had with these games at all. And then we got Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, pretty much a one-to-one recreation of the original games on the DS. Truth be told, I have never beaten any adaptation of a Sinnoh game. Never beat Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, Legends Arceus, or BDSP. Not because I got bored with the game, or it becomes too challenging, I just lose interest. Which in some regards is not the same thing as being bored with it. Eventually, I'd like to go back and play through and beat BDSP, but again, no real core memories here either. I won't go too deep into Legends Arceus as I just made a whole video on that game. But with my first playthrough of the game, I had taken a week off of work. Okay, I know, I'm a nerd for taking time off of work to play a game, but I had vacation days to use, and I had nothing going on at the time. So I had taken a whole week off, yet I beat the main story within 2 days. That's how excited and pumped I was to play a still experimental but so close on getting their open world Pokemon game. Sure, that gives me plenty of time to defeat Volo and capture Arceus, but one thing you should know about me is once I beat the main story, it's very rare I do any post-game content, which sucks because I'm only missing like 10 Pokemon before facing Arceus. Maybe one day I will catch those 10 and finally beat the game. Lastly, we have Scarlet and Violet. Graphically, these games are so dog shit. I'm sorry, but if Metroid Prime 4 looks like this, going back to Scarlet and Violet gives me severe whiplash. Dear Lord, this game looks like a night after eating nothing but Taco Bell for 2 hours straight. Like, why did they think this was okay? Personally, I'm not one to be too picky about graphics in games. As long as the game is fun to play, I'm okay with not the best graphics. But when the frame rate is consistently bad and a required part of the game, I can look in the distance and feel disgust as opposed to awe, and just a bountiful of other graphical issues, then it hinders the experience for me. Graphics aside, I liked most of what Scarlet Violet had to offer. I liked Arven, Nemona, and even Clavel as characters, not you, Penny. I like that there was a challenge for each type of Pokemon. Not a huge fan of time battles or team star raids. They were okay, just not my favorite kind of challenge. Arven's storyline is one of my favorites in a Pokemon game. Didn't think Pokemon would ever go that dark. Spoiler warning, I guess. I know his story isn't that dark, but mind you, this is a children's game and talks about a critical, almost fatally injured dog and the dude's parents died. Like, what? Disney and Pixar haven't even done anything like that since I almost killed the toys in Toy Story 3. I think. Tell me if I'm wrong. Long story short, these games had their issues, but what they lack in some areas, they made up in others. Also, being able to roam around the same world with other friends is such a much needed element in a Pokemon game. It makes it actually feel like you're on a journey, much like the Pokemon anime. And growing up watching that, that's all I ever wanted in a game. The following year after the Switch's release was the most hyped up moment for so many fans, as the ending of the March 8th Nintendo Direct revealed that Super Smash Bros. Was indeed coming to the Switch, with the only characters confirmed at that point being Mario, Link with an updated Breath of the Wild look, and newcomer Inkling. With just those last two, I was already pumped, as Breath of the Wild and Splatoon were some of my favorite games at the time. Not only that, we got a release date of it being released within the same year, so there's a lot of build-up to be had. Then came E3 2018, when we got the news that everyone is here. Such an iconic line for the franchise, as every character that had been in previous installment of Smash would be returning. For me, some memorable inclusions would be Mewtwo, Pokemon Trainer, Wolf, and Ice Climbers. I know Mewtwo is DLC for Smash 4, and Charizard was included in Smash 4 as well, but all the Pokemon coming back just put a huge smile on my face. Wolf is my favorite Star Fox character from the Smash roster, and having another villain back in the selection enhances both Star Fox and Smash. Ice Climbers weren't my favorite to play, but would occasionally play them just for funsies, and they'd been around for so long that they were one of the oldest members that has ever been cut from a game. But not only was everyone returning, we were still getting some newcomers. Remember how I was talking about Wolf's inclusion expanding the villains roster? Well, then they went ahead and added Ridley, a character previously shut down as a playable character, but sure enough, they made him work. I haven't played any Metroid at that point, but I was so involved in Smash's presence online that I knew that Ridley had been highly requested. And it was from that moment that it became tradition for our friend and myself to watch the directs whenever they were announced, so that way we could react to whatever newcomer would be announced into the game. We would go back and forth discussing any leaks that would pop up across the internet. Most of them would be people making things up just to get some attention, but hey, it was fun to theorize who could possibly be the next addition to the biggest crossover in gaming history. Neither my friend nor I were super into Castlevania, so Simon Richter's reveal wasn't too appealing for us. However, we saw how ridiculous their items and chains were, so we thought they were interesting to play in less serious matches. But with the same direct that we got Simon and Richter, we also got the reveal of Echo Fighters, Chrom and Dark Samus. The whole time we thought that Chrom was an echo of Ike just because of his recovery, so we were so confused when we found out that he was an echo of Roy. Fire Emblem Awakening was the only Fire Emblem game I've ever played, so seeing Chrom included was an interesting choice, especially with Lucina and Robin already present in the game. With Metroid Prime 4 revealed, I really want to get into the Metroid Prime games. That way I can get a better appreciation for Dark Samus's inclusion to the game. I love the trope of evil doppelgangers, in whichever way they're created, so it truly makes sense having Dark Samus as an Echo Fighter. For me, as long as the character looks fun to play, I'm all for it. So with King K. Rool's introduction, again, I didn't play much of Donkey Kong games, so I wasn't so invested into King K. Rool as a character, but as a fighter, he seemed like an incredibly fun, heavy character. We'll dive deep into my fascination with Animal Crossing later, but having another rep from the franchise should have been exciting for me with how much I enjoy that series. But seeing as she's pretty much a clone of Villager was a bit underwhelming to say the least. I also didn't play New Leaf that much, so I didn't get to experience the hype of that game and how Isabelle was introduced to the series. The final trailer of the game of Ultimate brought us the reveals of our last regular and Echo Fighter. I can appreciate what Street Fighter brings in terms of fighting game legacy, however that style of fighting game is not for me. I much prefer the platform style that Ultimate showcases, so for me, Ken's inclusion was pretty meh. But then that got followed up with Incineroar. Sun and Moon quickly ranked up there with my favorite Pokemon games. Don't ask why, they just did, okay? So seeing Incineroar gain the last spot on the roster was bittersweet. I would prefer to have Decidueye as he is my favorite grass type starter, but there is some Sun and Moon representation, so I'll be happy with what I can get. And turns out, I actually love the way Incineroar plays. One fighter that I was hoping for was Shovel Knight. He became a big name in the indie gaming world, and I feel like he was set up to have a pretty good moveset. Meanwhile, my friends are huge Sonic fans, so they were hoping for Shadow, even if he was an Echo Fighter. Just the chance to play him would have been so great for them. Sadly, all our hopes and dreams were shot down when both of our wishlisted fighters were revealed as assist trophies. The wave of emotions just kept coming, as it was also revealed that Piranha Plant would be the first DLC fighter for Ultimate. Out of all the characters to pick in gaming history, I wouldn't have it any other way. This guy is just completely silly, and that makes him a perfect match for myself. With everything revealed, my friends and I were ready to smash. One of these days I'll grow up and not make that joke anymore. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate happened to be released on one of our friends' birthdays, so we all spent the day together from early afternoon all the way to midnight release, to celebrate our friend and our love for several iconic video game characters. This is a memory I still look back at fondly, and wish moments like this happened more often. With the base game released and DLC on the way in the forms of Fighters Pass 1 and 2, there were so many more characters to hopefully get through and become part of this insane roster. As I've spent a lot of time on Smash to this point, I'm going to try to speed through my experiences on the DLC, as most of it wasn't as memorable as the main game for me. I had no idea the Persona franchise even existed until I saw Joker's trailer, so seeing him caused me more confusion than excitement. And sure enough, after his reveal is when I began to see Persona everywhere. It doesn't look like a game that I'd be interested in, and his gimmick didn't interest me either. However, with his release came the Stage Builder, and fun fact, the videos that got me kickstarted on YouTube were Stage Builder videos. Those videos are now private as they are not the style of videos I wanted to have on my channel moving forward though. Heroes inclusion made me want to play the Dragon Quest games. I know the games aren't connected, however I wanted to start with one and see how the games progressed onward. And while I've only gone through the first 3 and through most of 4, I love the franchise and the legacy it carries. I've never played Banjo-Kazooie, but hey, a 3D platformer that Xbox now owns, crazy inclusion. I have never heard of Terry before in my life, but he's another standard fighting game character, so he's not my playstyle whatsoever. Byleth is another Fire Emblem character. Yay! Like I said, I've only played Awakening, so I could care less about any other Fire Emblem inclusions. Not bashing on the franchise, because I know it gets a lot of flack for the insane amount of fighters in Ultimate, but I'm just saying that this was a very underwhelming final fighter for the first wave of DLC. But then they announced that an ARMS fighter would be joining the game, and as probably one of ARMS' only fans, I was excited. Since Springman was already an assist trophy, it was very unlikely that the face of the franchise would make it in. Of all the other characters in that roster, I could not have picked a better choice than Midman. Do I have some bias? Absolutely. Did they do well with her character design? Absolutely. Is she my favorite fighter in Smash? Not at all. Steve's inclusion was absolutely wild. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Steve's trailer broke Twitter when it first released. Minecraft has such an impact on both new and old gamers that it felt right to have him included in gaming's biggest crossover. And to top it all off, he is apparently super broken and a top tier character. That's actually insane. To make Steve's trailer even better, it was followed up with the dark and brooding Sephiroth trailer, where it implied that he stabs Mario. The fact Nintendo was okay with this imagery is crazy. I know how iconic of a villain Sephiroth is. Sadly, I've never played any Final Fantasy game, so I was not as hyped for him as the rest of the world was. Again, with long RPGs I've never played. Xenoblade is one of them that I would like to give it a shot, but it's rare that I have the time to sink into such a game like that nowadays, so Pyro and Mythra's inclusion didn't gain my attention too well either. If you made it this far, you know my take on Ken, you know my take on Terry. I'll let you figure out what my take on Kazuya is. And then the end-all be-all Sora. I did not grow up playing Kingdom Hearts. I remember always seeing the trailer for 358 over 2 days on commercial breaks, and I was so confused with anime characters mixed with Disney characters. It wasn't until one of my friends introduced me to the game where I began to understand, as much as you can with Kingdom Hearts. While the characters can be corny and the story can be confusing if your reading comprehension can't surpass the 4th grade, I do enjoy the fluid feeling of the game's combat and the exploring of different worlds, be it Disney or an original one. Kingdom Hearts is a game about traversing to other worlds and to cross over between several franchises, so it seems fitting that he is the final fighter to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. The next big Switch game that had a huge impact on me, and pretty much the rest of the world, Animal Crossing New Horizons. While the world fell apart due to the pandemic beginning, I, JohnRamen, an essential worker mind you, took a week of vacation in order to play my silly island simulation with cute animals. Again, before people begin to criticize me of how much of a nerd I am, I use time off to play video games when I have nothing else going on. And considering the pandemic was in the midst of starting, this feels a bit justified. I spent day in and day out playing this game. My friends would be at work, and I'm just catching fish, catching bugs, paying off my debt, and working on my island. I spent a grand total of 115 hours playing Animal Crossing in the first week alone. It felt as if the rest of the world was just hopping on the bandwagon of playing Animal Crossing. It escalated in popularity for a social aspect at the time, where social interaction was very limited. So as the rest of the world hopped on this bandwagon, again, while the world is in shambles, falling apart in every waking moment, I, JohnRamen, was an OG Animal Crossing player. This would be a game I played on the GameCube, just running around the world, helping my villagers with tasks they prevented, upgrade my house along with Tom Nook's shop, and experience all the types of events presented within the game. Before time traveling even became a controversial topic, I was doing that left and right, mainly for the holiday events. If it was in the middle of September and I wanted to see fireworks, I would time travel to the 4th of July so I could see some fireworks. Things like that. So getting to experience a home console Animal Crossing experience again just felt like coming home after a long vacation. There's comfort and familiarity to the game that no other game would come close to replicating. And then they had like 2 updates to the game and abandoned it. With that, I've reminisced about all the main Switch games that have caused a positive impact for me as a gamer. Be it the first year games, games that came shortly thereafter, or games that came many years later. But I didn't talk about all the games that I've enjoyed. For now, I will quickly go through some other games that are also memorable for me. I'll be going in chronological order by year from here on out so you can see how my journey went from the beginning to the end. Here we go. I never got a chance to play Hyrule Warriors on the Wii U, or God forbid on the 3DS, so when the deluxe version came out, I thought I'd give it a try. I played for the first mission, and then never really went back to it, up until Age of Calamity was announced, so I went back and played through to get hyped for it, and it was really fun. Kind of mindless button mashing while still trying to complete objectives, but with many characters with different playstyles to choose from, although I'm pretty sure I stuck with Link most of the time. I love Mario Party. I didn't play too much of it growing up, but it's definitely up there with my favorite Mario games. However, Super Mario Party is not a great game at all. The positives of it are the character dice and being able to have other characters join you, and while I see the downsides of the latter, mainly when you need a super precise roll, it was still fun seeing a whole roster running around the board, which segues us into the negatives of the game. Being only limited to one Joy-Con and having only 4 pretty below average maps did not bring great replayability to the game. The only decent-ish maps are the ruins and the mines, so when the board options are half, the controls are bad, it led to a very short lifespan for Super Mario Party. It's kinda sad that the only game in 2019, aside from Sword and Shield, that got me excited was Tetris 99. In a day and age where Battle Royales took the gaming world by storm, I never would have thought that a Tetris Battle Royale would be my favorite one. I just couldn't get into Fortnite, PUBG, or any other ones. But something about Tetris 99 was so addictive. Maybe it's because I'm awful at shooters and better at puzzle games, yet I haven't touched the game in so long, and now I want to play it again, damn it. Age of Calamity was both great and not great at the same time. Getting to experience the war that took place before the Great Calamity hit and actually fighting army versus army was such a cool idea to prologue Breath of the Wild. I'm not too picky when it comes to low frame rate games as long as it isn't a constant struggle. Well, Age of Calamity was a constant struggle. I also wasn't too crazy about the ending as it's left pretty ambiguous if the game is actually canon to the lore of Breath of the Wild. I can't remember if it's been confirmed or not, but either way, not too crazy about it. One positive I do remember is how cool the character interaction was, even if they may or may not be dead now. Pokémon Mystery Dungeon was the first Pokémon spin-off game I had ever played, unless you count Pokémon Channel on GameCube. Did we talk about Pokémon Channel yet? No? Not the time? Okay. Anyways, I had Red Rescue Team on the Game Boy Advance, so seeing the DX version ported to the Switch brought back such a wave of nostalgia. The storybook aesthetic looks charming, and my god, the music in this game brings me back to simpler times. I still haven't beaten the game yet, but I still love the concept, and I need to beat it, along with the other Mystery Dungeon games. Okay, enough time has passed to say that what Nintendo did for Super Mario 3D All-Stars was so ridiculously stupid. Having it be a limited time run of 3 pretty much emulated games, not including Galaxy 2, I have no idea what they were thinking with this. In all honesty, I only picked this up to play Super Mario Sunshine. Again, nostalgia took the reins of my wallet, as that is the 3D Mario game I played growing up. I never beat Sunshine as a kid, and playing through 3D All-Stars, I can understand why. This game is hard, and when I did beat it, I was like, okay, do I really ever want to play this again? Don't get me wrong, the worlds, the atmosphere, the music in Sunshine are phenomenal. My favorites in any Mario game. I even like Flood as a tool to help Mario, better than I did Cappy. But repetitive level objectives and some of the secret levels are just a pain to deal with. I also learned through 3D All-Stars that I do not like Mario 64 whatsoever. If you've seen me play Ocarina of Time, you know I complain about camera movements. Yet the camera in Mario 64 is even more atrocious. Luckily, I grew up in the GameCube era of Mario because I find these games more enjoyable than the 64 era of Mario. Speaking of GameCube era Mario Golf on the GameCube was another game I sunk so many hours into growing up. So it comes to no surprise that when Mario Golf was announced for the Switch, my nostalgia, once again, got the best of me and I picked it up right away. And I typically play the most basic version of this game. No power-ups, typically no crazy map, just standard golf. And it is the most relaxing time I think I can have playing golf. I'm sure there's a whole other level of depth and gameplay to the game if I ever played with the other rules and abilities on, but I like to keep things to their simplest forms. But hey, I have a whole video on golf games that will tell you more in-depth thoughts on that. As opposed to Super Mario Party, Mario Party Superstars was a massive improvement to the former. This is coming from the perspective of someone who has played very little of the older Mario Party games, so playing on these boards and these minigames is a completely fresh experience for myself and my friends. Even if I had played the older Mario Party games, nostalgia would have taken hold on me again. Out of the 2 Mario Party games released on the Switch, this is still the one my friends and I play to this day. Hopefully Super Mario Party Jamboree is a great mashup of these 2 games, making it the pinnacle of Mario Party on the Switch. Metroid Dread was my first dip into the Metroid franchise as a whole. I enjoy the platforming genre. I enjoy the exploration of the Metroidvania subgenre, and there's enough action in this game to keep every aspect of all these features balanced, as all things should be. I am not the greatest player when it comes to the stealth missions, so the rooms where I had to avoid the enemy definitely got challenging, especially some of the later ones. My memory also isn't the greatest, so backtracking for some random door to progress 3 areas ago isn't the most fun experience, but that's the price I pay for this genre. Regardless, I feel like Dread was a great game to jump into the Metroid franchise, as I now want to play all the other 2D and Prime games now. From what I recall, fans did not enjoy Skyward Sword as much as other Zelda games, at least during its run during the Wii era. And I understand where the fans are coming from. The imprisoned fights were definitely repetitive, as well as only going to the same 3 sections of the world constantly with no real overworld exploration. But it was pretty interesting playing Breath of the Wild before Skyward Sword, now knowing that Skyward Sword was their testing grounds to see what could work in an open world setting. Overall, I actually enjoyed Skyward Sword quite a bit. Wouldn't put it in my favorite Zelda games, but it wasn't bad, and I would probably play through it again. 2 words. Kirby car. That was all I had to see to be sold on Kirby in the Forgotten Land. Unfortunately, right when the game released was around the time I was in the process of moving, so buying a new game was not on my radar whatsoever, in regards to both time and financial reasons. I had some friends come visit me to see my new plays, and to my surprise, as a housewarming, or rather apartment warming gift, they got me Kirby in the Forgotten Land. Now, was I able to play right away? Not exactly. Obviously, being busy unpacking and getting situated in my own living space for the first time, I had very little time for gaming. But when I did get the time to play Forgotten Land, boy was it an experience. It had been a while since I played a good Kirby game. The last one I remember having such a fun time with was Return to Dreamland, as Star Allies was a disappointment for me. So Forgotten Land was such a breath of fresh air. The levels were fun, the power-ups were unique. Definitely the most memorable experience for me was how you defeat the final boss by swallowing a whole semi-truck and ramming it into a godlike entity, which, in all honesty, is pretty standard for a Kirby game. And then it's downhill from here. These next 2 games I only mention as they've each had a specific kind of impact in my time playing the Switch. First up, we have Splatoon 3. As I've mentioned, I played so much of Splatoon 1 and 2, both games being incredibly fun to play and experience Nintendo's take on the shooter genre. But when it came to Splatoon 3, I launched the game once. At this point, it felt like I was playing the same game for the 3rd time. Splatoon had for all intents and purposes turned into Nintendo's Call of Duty or Madden, where only a few changes are made and they call it a new game. It turned even worse than what some people think Pokémon is. Don't get me wrong, Pokémon definitely can get repetitive with their games, but at least they tried to be inventive with new battle mechanics and some changes to the standard formula. But I just felt like I had already played so much Splatoon that I need a real refresh into the series before I play it again, and Splatoon 3 was not it for me. I don't even know where to begin with Nintendo Switch Sports. As iconic as Wii Sports was for the Wii, Nintendo Switch Sports turned into a laughingstock of the series. The fact that this game came out 5 years after the release of the Switch, whereas Wii Sports was a launch title, is just sad. Sure, they may not have had it be a launch title to assure fans that they weren't making a 3rd Wii console, but still, sad. What's even sadder is the release of content afterwards. The first update being the Golf update came out 7 months after release, which seemed like a reasonable time frame. It gave people enough time to play through the game, let it rest, and then build up enough hype to bring people back to it. But then with the latest Nintendo Direct, we are now getting the 2nd update. 2 years later. If they were adding multiple sports, I could see more reasoning behind it, but 2 years for just basketball is ridiculous. At this point, most people have forgotten about the game and have since moved on. 2 years is a lot of time for people to completely move on from a game, and I don't think basketball is enough to bring people back. But for every negative, there comes a positive, being Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. It had been a long time since my last midnight release, the last one being for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. But there was no way I was missing out on playing Tears of the Kingdom immediately. I was almost going to go to the midnight release by myself, which is something I wouldn't normally do. I'd much prefer to go with other people to do things like that and create memories much like I did with Ultimate. But luckily, a friend of a friend who I had known for quite some time at this point was also a huge Zelda nerd, so he and I decided to team up and collect the game when the clock struck 12. It was a bit later than 12 though, since we were like 30th in line, but we still got it pretty much right away. We got it, we went our separate ways, and then we played throughout the night, texting each other about all the stuff we were finding. I just remember finding a sword infused with the Zonai flame emitter, and immediately texted him and was like, yo, I got a sword that shoots fire. And that was just the beginning, like 20 minutes into the game. Despite this Hyrule being the same as Breath of the Wild, it felt old but new, as finding things in places where they weren't still felt like I was exploring a new world. My one complaint I had with Tears of the Kingdom was how they advertised being able to explore the sky as the big new feature, yet to me, the sky felt very lackluster. Aside from the Great Sky Island and the wind and water temples, there was very little to do in the skies. But I swiftly forgot about my disappointment in the skies when I discovered the depths. I probably spent the most amount of time in Tears of the Kingdom down in the depths. I thought that was so cool to explore a dark, inverse world of Hyrule, getting there by plummeting through the chasms, all the gloom that covered the land. I would honestly play through the game again just so I could delve deep down there once more. And I haven't even gotten to the ending of the game yet. Now, the game is over a year old at this point, but I still feel like I should avoid some spoilers. What isn't too much of a spoiler is obviously the final boss being Ganondorf, and like with most final bosses, he has several phases. And just when you think one phase was a challenge, the next one increases that challenge tenfold. But that fight was probably the most fun final boss fight probably from any Zelda game that I've ever played. And the very last sequence when the fight is done, if my Switch wasn't on the verge of completely blowing up, I would start another playthrough of Tears of the Kingdom right now. It's with this walk down memory lane that I find myself not realizing how many great impactful memories I had with the Nintendo Switch. There's so much more I haven't even touched on, as I pretty much went through the first party games. I didn't even touch on the indie games, the other multiplayer adventures I've had. That's how much of an impact the Switch, along with gaming in general, has on myself, and many others. So if my ramblings here have meant anything to anyone, it's to not take anything for granted, and to not be afraid to reminisce about the good times, even if there are no more good times to be had with an individual. Live in the moment, tell your friends you love them, pet a dog, take a moment to just breathe. And with that, I request a moment of silence, in respect and in honor of my Nintendo Switch. Thank you.